They entered through a side door on the outskirts of the city. Few words were exchanged. They entered the abandoned warehouse. They came to see a performance and paid a small fee at the door to do so. Electric light glimmered in the entrance, dim from an auxiliary generator. An usher directed them up the dusty stairwell. Everything smelled like factory dirt and dry cement, and at the top of the stair the light was warmer and more secure. They moved toward it like hungry moths. And then, in this main room, another usher, wearing white gloves and thin gold glasses, gave them programs. A woman sat in front of them, head down in black pants, wearing a crisp white shirt. She looked like a beatnik. Her fringe was cropped flat against her head. She held a cigarette in her hand and never took it in. Instead, the smoke spiraled up in lazy coils that gathered by the nearest light overhead, an accidental spot. The woman seemed preoccupied. Other than a gurney and a medical table, a proportion of the room, the stage, was bare and sterile. There were no pregnant women in the audience. The audience sat on bare wooden benches. They rocked slightly back and forth under different uncoordinated weights. The benches were not perfectly balanced, nor was the floor perfectly level. Because the room was cold, everyone kept their coats on, and most left their hands in their pockets. A few people smiled, but did so nervously. A wife squeezed her lover's thigh, while her lover continued to study the woman on stage, for the woman had not moved. Some 40 people assembled in this room. Formal gowns peered beneath woolen coats. The leather of fine shoes glimmered, except where dust from other parts of the building collected on the surface. A doctor entered with a lab coat. He tied the artist's arm to make it bulge, then popped a vein with his needle. Being used to the operation, his subject only winced slightly. She opened her eyes and looked at the audience for the first time. Behind her, a projection screen came to life. They watched an aerial view of a woman's bare chest on an operating table. Most of the audience would forget the presence of this projection and remember instead the woman on stage being naked, though she was not. They watched the doctor prick her other arm, this time to draw the blood out, her human blood, in order to create a vacuum in her body such that the horse's blood might rush in more quickly. The artist's veins were red and swollen. You could see through her skin where it puffed up, angry, containing this foreign energy. It was greedy to possess, consume, and digest her all at once, yet her face remained placid. The cigarette, abandoned on the floor by her feet, smoked itself. The woman became a horse, she said, right before the people's eyes. They watched her transform. They saw her face grow ever more horsey. As her human blood let out one side, she drew the beast inside the other, fainted but a moment, and then came to, her eyes expanding differently to the light. Her sense of smell more acute. She snorted and stamped her foot, impatient. The doctor quickly put a harness around her head. He attached a lead and tied her to the chair where she waited more patiently, an elephant tied to a tree with a very fine rope. Not so long ago, a girl was told to shoot the family horse. It was old with age and tired of life. She used to ride it as a child. It had been her companion for as long as she could remember. They were the same age, in fact. Still, the girl believed in her mother's kindness. There was trust and decency between them, so she brought the horse to the edge of their property, the farthest pasture, far away from the barn, even farther from the house. She brought her boyfriend also, for he knew how to clean a corpse. It was easier than she had expected. She heard a bang and watched the horse's face as it exhaled and fell down. Its eyes, cloudy with cataracts, became mirrors. Her boyfriend cut a knife through the horse's gut, and steam rose out of its belly as its gut slipped out, a bag of hot snakes. Her impression of the moment was such that the girl removed her clothes and slipped inside the horse. She fell asleep, prolonging their inevitable supper. When she woke up, it was cold, and she wept. Their haunches had gone numb with the bench. A woman sneezed in the back. The artist came to and shook her head, and her harness chimed like coins where it connected to the lead. The doctor brought out a pair of stilts with horse hooves at the end, and the woman climbed into them. When she walked back and forth, the doctor holding her head, for she seemed nervous, there was a clacking of hooves. Her stilts had been fitted with horseshoes. The doctor smiled confidently into her eyes. Then the artist leaned slowly around, and with her white, clean teeth, she got hold of the soft side piece of the man's hand, the piece at the base of the little finger to the wrist, and she bit it. Probably she did not bite very hard, but it was a stern, authoritative bite, and it told the audience suddenly of a deep, real passion they had not known yet, nor even thought about. The artist looked at the audience. Her eyes were clear and impersonal and swung from their faces to the doctor. Everyone looked quickly away, and for a long time felt very young and humiliated. And the doctor rubbed his wrist. Far in the distance, in a far away and perhaps dirtier room, they heard a rhythmic clapping of hooves draw near. The artist stopped short and raised her head. She seemed to prick her ears, trying to listen to the distance between sounds. She snorted. The clapping sounds grew nearer and more precise. The artist shook her head with a clinking sound when a larger, dark horse came into the room. It was led by another doctor. This horse shone almost cherubic, calm and composed. It had a glossy coat. It was robust and virile and young. Its nostrils flared. The first doctor untied the artist. He led her to the horse, and together, doctors, horse, and artist paraded around the room. Their feet sounded like drums warming up, out of sync but warm, chipping at cement. There was an unusual amount of snuffing, at which time the audience began to clap. After the horse left, the artist took off her stilts and resumed her chair, where the doctor once more drained one sort of blood and replaced it with her original human kind. When horse blood had run through her, they froze on separate petri dishes, artifacts of hybridity. Each member of the audience took one home as a souvenir. They would discuss this object at length during dinner, passing it amongst the cheeses and pâtés, their mouths red with wine. The artist would sell the rest at Sotheby's.